All right, heavy metal contamination. So there's a lot of ways to have what we call like contamination in water. The pH levels could be off. We can have like the over or under salting of water. There are other ions that are not metals that could appear in water, like excess sulfur and excess chlorine. Those aren't metals, but they can be in water. And then heavy metals is another one. Heavy metals specifically are important because they're bad for your health. So there's EPA regulations about how much you can take into your system and stuff like that. Okay, so basically, um, the metals that aren't considered heavy metals are iron with a 3 plus charge, specifically potassium, calcium, and magnesium. So iron with the 3 plus charge is the like iron in your blood, so that's okay. You don't want to get like rust is the 2 plus charge ion, and that's not great. But the blood iron is fine. And potassium, we need potassium in our bodies, right, in order to function. You can get too much potassium, but you definitely want it in your blood. Calcium, right, that makes our bones strong. Magnesium helps with electrolytes. So like those are all good metals, but there are bad metals. So heavy metals do things like damage your nervous system, your liver, your kidneys. That's like the filtration of the blood, right? So if you're getting heavy metals in your blood, it's going to hurt your kidneys and your liver. Um, most heavy metals also build up through the food chain, which means you can get heavy metal poisoning from eating fish. We hear that a lot with mercury levels, right? We like women that are pregnant are told not to eat fish like tuna and stuff because they have high levels of mercury. That's because the mercury that's in the fish could be passed on to you. So it does build up through the food chain. And the worst part is that they can dissolve in water. So you can get them just from water. No, hold on, let me pause this. There we go. Okay, so I was saying that unfortunately, heavy metals do dissolve in water, so you can get it from drinking groundwater or even, like I said, up the food chain. So anybody else that drinks like groundwater that happens to be contaminated um, can absorb these heavy metals. All right, so the first heavy metal is lead, the first one we're going to talk about. It's found in paint. Actually, that's a huge place that it was found that we don't put it anymore. But if you go into like really older homes that haven't been painted in a while, or if your painter, like the last time your house was painted, if your paint got painted over rather than like stripped and then painted, there could be lead in that paint. We used to put it in gasoline, so now that's why when you go to like a gasoline pump, it says unleaded because it's specifically telling you there's no lead in there. What happened was as cars like you know burned, they were creating like emissions, but not only like gaseous emissions, they were also emitting like liquid, and like lead would come out of cars, drop onto like the cement, the sidewalk, the streets, the whatever, and it would seep into the groundwater. So we had like high levels of groundwater, like lead contamination from gasoline. Um, you can have some. It won't kill you immediately. So the EPA does allow a limit of 0.05 ppm. So if you remember from the last notes, ppm means parts per million, or that's like the same conversion for 50 parts per billion. Mercury is the next heavy metal. So this is the only one that's liquid at room temperature. The rest are all solid. Sometimes if you look at the periodic table, it'll show like blue for the liquid elements, and then like black for the solid, and then red for the gas. So in some periodic tables, you can tell just by looking at it which elements are liquid at room temperature. But mercury is one, and bromine is the other. But mercury is the only metal that's liquid at room temperature. It used to be found in thermometers. Now the thermometers are red because we use alcohol, but we used to use mercury. So if you find an old thermometer, you can tell it's mercury because the stuff inside is silver. If the stuff inside is red, it is an alcohol thermometer. But if it's silver, it's a mercury thermometer. And every once in a while, I see one of those floating around at like garage sales, or I believe I have one in the classroom. You guys don't use it, but it's here just because it's old. It's from 20, 30 years ago. There used to be mercury in paint. There's not anymore, but that is somewhere they used to find it as well. Mercury poisoning can cause numbness. It can attack your nervous system. So that's why it's causing numbness. Your nervous system is like your spine and your brain. So if it's attacking your spine, then you can't, function. You can lose loss of your limbs. It can also cause brain damage, like loss of memory, or it can cause like a form of insanity. So that's why, like the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland, they said he like went crazy on mercury poisoning. That's sort of what happened there. It does attack the nervous system. You can get some mercury in your system. So when people say like, oh, you're going to eat too much fish, you would have to eat like 3 cans of tuna every day for like 10 years in order to reach the EPA limit. But there is an EPA limit, 0.002 grams per liter. Yeah. Oh, I know what else I wanted to say is back in the I want to say it was 80s or 90s, mercury was in paint, and there was a toy company, and I forget the toy company, but you could probably Google it and find it if you were really curious. There was a toy company that had toys like made in China, and there was paint. The toys were painted, right? And it was a toy company though, and so kids tend to put toys in their mouth when they're playing, right? I mean, you guys have all seen like little babies maybe, or I doubt you remember, but they would put toys in their mouth and sort of chew on them while they were playing. And there was actually lead in that paint. I know that was the previous slide, but there was lead in that paint, and a lot of babies got really sick. Some even died. So there was like a huge recall on toys to like repaint them without lead. But that was before we knew the effects, like the true effects of lead poisoning and how much you need in your system in order to hurt you. And those were babies, so a little less for them. Their systems aren't fully developed yet. But so it was a huge deal back then. That information is probably Googleable, but I don't remember the name of the toy company. The last heavy metal that we're going to talk about is cadmium. So cadmium is found steel, batteries, photography. It can also be found in cigarette smoke. So it accumulates in the liver and kidneys. So it actually doesn't leave your body. Once it's in there, it's in there. It replaces the calcium in your bones, making your bones like more brittle. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't leave your body. So it increases every year. You can't get rid of it. The EPA limit is 10 parts per billion. So very, very low. And again, cigarette smoke is the number one source of cadmium like these days. It still is in steel, I believe, and batteries and photography. I don't think it's been removed from any of those things. We don't typically ingest any of that, but we do ingest cigarette smoke, which is how you would get cadmium poisoning. Even if you don't smoke, you could get it through secondhand smoke. So those are it. Those are the 3 main heavy metals that I wanted to discuss with you guys. Thanks. Let me know if you have any questions.